Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to the SoFin Podcast, part of the FinServe Marketing Podcast Network. This week on the show, I'm joined by Lamine Zarrad, the co-founder and CEO of Joust. You can find them at joust.com. Now, Joust is a really interesting startup solving a really pressing need for many of you, I suspect. They are making it possible for freelancers, your solopreneurs, your independent contractors to get paid more quickly from their clients. And if you've ever been an independent contractor or freelancer, you know that's one of the biggest challenges. You send an invoice to your client. The client sometimes is a bigger company, and they have payment terms of 30 days, 45 days, 60 days sometimes. And you're looking at it going, hey, I've got these invoices out in the world and I need money now. I don't have the luxury of holding off on paying my bills like a big company does. I need cash in the door now. So Lamine saw that challenge with his co-founder and decided to go at solving that. And in the process of doing that, as you'll hear Lamine say, they created a whole banking solution for freelancers. Really, really interesting lessons learned. What really is going to blow your mind here is, though, you'll hear Lamine share that in less than a year from ideation to we're in the market with a real solution, they got a banking solution off the ground. And that is unheard of. And it's one of the things that makes the fintech world that we're living in now very exciting, because prior to this, it would have taken years to get a new banking solution off the ground. But leveraging APIs, leveraging other solutions where you can white label and build upon other pieces, the building blocks that are there now for a fintech startup, you can get off the ground much quicker and into the marketplace and start doing business. Now, another little interesting thing you're going to hear from Lamine and me in our conversations, that his prior startup was a company called Token. And that's actually when Lamine and I met. And he demoed Token at SoFin a few years back. And it was really a hit. It was actually the most popular startup at that event, because Token was a financial solution, fintech solution for the legal cannabis market. That's right, weed, right? So he was helping people who grow weed, sell weed via dispensaries legally, of course, to manage their money, because it's a regulated space. And in many cases, banks would not touch the money from that business because at the federal level, cannabis was still illegal. But being a former federal regulator, Lamine knew how to navigate some of those challenges. So really, really interesting stuff. Lamine's a great dude, serial entrepreneur, as you'll hear, just deep dive knowledge. And what I'm really impressed with, like I said, is how he can look at these really, really complex business opportunities that most of us would shy away from because it just looks scary as heck, go at them and make them happen. So you're going to love this conversation with Lamine. Before we dive into the conversation with Lamine, I encourage you to swing by finservemarketing.com/podcast. Check out some of the other podcasts on the network. This week on the Advisor Financing Forum, I have Katie Bruner, one of the managing partners at Skyview, joining me. And we have a really in-depth conversation on how to be prepared to acquire another financial advisory business, right? That marketplace is really heating up, as you'll hear us talk about frequently on the Advisor Financing Forum podcast, and also over on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast by Truelytics. We're talking a lot about the next decade. There is going to be this massive wave of transition, because the average age of a financial advisor today is 60 years old. And that means more than 40% of them are over 60. And that usually means they're at the tail end of their career. So one way or the other, they're going to be exiting the business. And that means there's going to be business in motion for other financial advisors and other wealth management firms, be the RIAs or other structures, are going to be there to acquire those businesses and roll those assets and those clients in. But here's the deal. If you are looking to buy a business, you can't just roll in and say, I'm ready, right? There's some preparedness you have to have. And it's not only on the financing side, as Katie and the Skyview team deal with most intently, if you will, that's their business. but it's also on just some of the other preparational stuff. Like, what do you have to do to make sure that you present yourself as a qualified buyer, as the buyer that is right for the advisor or the firm that's looking to exit the business? And they have developed this really in-depth roadmap, which includes things like the phone script to call and things like that. So you're going to love that podcast. Swing on over, check that out. Okay, now let's get to this conversation with Lamine Zarrad of Joust, starting a bank within less than a year, up and running. Really, really fascinating stuff. You're going to love it. Let's do it. Well, hey, Lamine, I'm so excited to have you on the show. We've been talking about it now for, I think, a little over a month, and you've had some really interesting developments going on behind the scenes there at Joust. So I'm thrilled that you finally have the opportunity to be on the show together.
Mike, I am incredibly excited to be on the show. I know this has been sort of going on for quite some time, and I'm glad we found the time slot
Yeah.
to get this together.
Fantastic. So I thought it would be a great idea, and I've been asking the last few guests to do this as well, to kick things off with maybe an elevator pitch for Joust so people can hear from you, the founder, what Joust does and why it's valuable to the world. So here you go. We're on the elevator. Let's hear it.
So Joust is the world's first bank account for small businesses and freelancers that guarantees that they get paid on their invoices. That is your elevator pitch. There's a lot more to it.
That's what that works. So anybody who's a small business owner or freelancer, independent, solopreneur, however you want to phrase yourself, contractor, knows the anxiety of like, when is this person going to pay me? When is this company going to pay me? I sent them an invoice, and it's really interesting. I've had to deal with that over the years where I'm a small company and I'll send an invoice to a larger company, and for them, when they're dealing with larger vendors, they're cool with it being 30 days receivable or whatever. When you're a smaller team, when you're 1, 2, or up to 6 employees or whatever, you're like, no, like now it should be great. So
Exactly.
I love the game. So,
Yeah,
what was your uh, aha moment for this? Where did this notion come about? Because this is the second startup you founded since I've known you.
that's right.
The previous was a company called Token, which was a fintech solution for the rapidly legalizing cannabis market. And there's a bit of a jump, at least, and I think in most people's mind were like, oh, he was helping the cannabis market with their finances and managing cash flow and money and making sure everything was, ticking the boxes that are necessary on a regulatory front. You can feel free to tell people more about Token if you like,
Yeah.
but what was the jump? What was the aha moment where you're like, yeah, Joust, that's the thing that needs to happen?
Funny you say that. It all started with Token. That was when I had the aha moment related to Joust. So I'll give you a bit of a background on Token and then the transition to Joust. So you're right. Token was built specifically to address the banking deficiency in the cannabis space. I'm a former federal bank regulator. My team worked on extrapolating on the guidance that at the time was sort of passed down from the Department of Justice to Treasury, and we created a laundry list of things that banks had to do to engage with high risk businesses such as cannabis. And a lot of it dealt with surveillance, pretty extensive transaction surveillance that financial institutions simply had no idea how to execute on, nor did they have access to software to facilitate. And so that's what Token did at its core. We built a system that brought in a ton of data from each transaction, contextualized it, and then we were using blockchain ledger to hash the metadata in order to create indelibility for auditors and federal government. And while running Token, we were looking at our application in different industries, and I was looking at a number of other high risk spaces, and then it occurred to me that businesses, just merchants and folks who accept credit cards today, that sort of framework and the paradigm of that entity is shifting. Right. Historically, when you think of a small business, it's a mom and pop shop. Right. It's a brick and mortar a cookie store to
Hmm.
kind
Hmm.
of simplify it. It's no longer the case. Most small businesses in America are service-based businesses, and a lot of them are creatives. These are freelancers, as we know. These freelancers are digital marketers, they're graphics designers, they're software engineers, and they don't think of themselves as quote unquote business. And their business, frankly, is so novel that banks don't even think of it as a business. They think it as like a source of income, and we have no idea what to do with it. And so while running Token, I realized that there's this huge segment, and it's growing, it's exploding. A number of underlying sort of secular trends that are impacting it, such as implementation of remote work tools, right? And we know that now with COVID, the entire world is working remotely. But 2 years ago, it was still kind of a taboo among the incumbents to even think about working remotely. But we knew the trend is happening, and folks are moving to remote work and contract work. And corporations are slowly sort of figuring out how to optimize their labor force by going after these independents. And so those independents operating as businesses and also as employees. And so banks have no idea how to treat that. And that was the first. I wouldn't call it an aha moment, but it was one of those moments where you say, I wonder if there's something there and if we can help, right? And so with Token, we ended up selling Token assets after the election, just because of the political climate and the fact that legal banking and legal marijuana industry, it has been offset by another God knows how long. At the time, we thought 4 years.
Hmm.
And so we said, we built a really unique way of looking at risk. Um, with cannabis dispensaries, we're able to pull data associated with their beneficiary owners, for instance, right? The know your customer data, KYC stuff. We also pulled the KYB data. We validated that that was a lawful, fully registered entity, and they're allowed to operate under the law in their respective jurisdiction. We also pulled non-traditional data sources. We pulled a whole slew of open source stuff, news, any kind of negative coverage, and it was done programmatically, and it was pulled into this one KYC profile that was floating, so to speak, right? There was a score that we developed associated with that profile, and we said, this is a very unique application here. I wonder if we can do this, but with a credit risk in mind instead of AML or anti-money laundering risk. Uh, and that was the aha moment. We said banks don't know how to serve a small business or a freelancer, and I don't want to be hyperbolic, but to be very specific is that they don't know how to underwrite them, how to underwrite risk associated with this new business. They know that if you're a butcher, this is your baseline in terms of the number of transactions a month, average size of the ticket, and so forth. If you're a bakery, this is it. And but if you're a software developer, they have no clue. And on top of that, you could be a software developer who only works 6 months out of the year, so maybe very seasonal. You may make $300,000 that year, but we've spoken to so many prospective clients before we build things who couldn't get a mortgage loan for a fraction of what they were bringing in annually, but because it was all seasonal, the financial institutions couldn't fit them into their little box. And so we said, well, why not use that same approach of bringing data from all these data sources, traditional and non-traditional? So identity data, we can pull in credit data, we can pull in non-traditional sort of open source data, and then we can, once they're in our system, obviously bring in data and attributes associated with what they do in our system, right? Behavioral data, how frequently do they log in? How many customers do they have? The size of the invoice, when does the invoice go out and when does it get paid? All of those, every single action has a interesting signal, and that signal, creates an insight in terms of, is this a good customer? Is this a bad customer? And, to be super simple here, and what do we think this customer is going to do behaviorally? And so, we build a product we call Gestalt. Gestalt is the beating heart of Joust. Gestalt is our risk engine. It's the model that powers the whole thing. Gestalt synthesizes and contextualizes every profile and every transaction. And Gestalt gives us the ability to really know our customers, right? Not just from like check the box banking perspective of this is a real person. Mike is, he's not a criminal. but rather,
You don't know that, by the way. You don't.
by the way, I cannot vouch. Yes, that's right. Cannot could not comment there. But we would, if you were our customer, we would want to know that Mike Langford is a small business and he's credit worthy. Even if you are an entrepreneur, like many entrepreneurs, may not have a perfect credit score, and so we wanted to bring in these other attributes. We also wanted to make sure that Mike's clients are decent clients, that he's, the company that Mike keeps, like
Mhm.
Lamine, is not impacting his business. And that's at the heart of the Gestalt, what we do. It's, think of it as like kind of an old school way of looking at risk, right? So, if you look at small banks around the country, like in the Midwest, when I was a regulator, I had banks in like Kansas and South Dakota. And loan officers in those banks, they don't have sophisticated tools. Everything is done on pen and paper still, and a decision is made based on gut. And that gut is so important in those personal relationships. When I used to interview these loan officers, and ask them questions about their loans, they would say things like, well, I go to church with him and I know his father, and, he's been in business for 15 years. Like we live in the same neighborhood. And those are very important factors, right? That are lost in a large kind of multinational operation. And we said, what if we can bring that, really sort of a personalized insight into a scalable cross-border transaction, and by pulling information, because people live online now, you don't have to live in the same neighborhood to go to the same church. We could pull that same sort of number of signals from your social media posts and a number of other things. And so that's what Gestalt does. And so it helps us to bring in our client. The client downloads the application, and we give them the tools that they need in one app. We give them a business bank account with a Visa debit card. We give them a merchant account so they don't have to go to Stripe or Square or PayPal to set up a payments function. It's already integrated. Seems like a no-brainer, right? You get a bank account,
Mhm.
you want to
Mhm.
get paid into that bank account, but no one else does it. And so we brought those two functions together, and we said, well, let's give them an invoicing tool. They don't have to go and get a third-party invoicing. There's so many different tools out there. We said, why not just have our own? That's modern, that's easy to use, super intuitive. So we'll build an invoicing solution on top of that. And last but not least, with Gestalt's, sort of an analytic engine that acts almost in real time, we were able to then underwrite every invoice. And when you send the invoice through us, you can guarantee that you get paid for 1%, which is really accessible. Meaning that if your client doesn't pay you in 30 days, we do. Think of it as insurance, but not real
Mhm.
insurance functionally. Or we instantly fund that invoice for 6%. So if you, like many entrepreneurs, need to get paid yesterday because the rent was due, and you have X amount in receivables, you can quite literally factor them in real time. So that is possible because Gestalt pools all of those different attributes, puts them in different risk buckets, assigns weights, assigns risk exponents to reflect our own tolerance toward those specific attributes, right? Not just the industry or type of work, but individual tiny little micro signals. And then we create this floating score that sort of resembles a FICO for a small business, but in my opinion, a lot more insightful. So I know this is
So
a lot.
no, that's good. No, so I'm gonna dive in on a couple of things that I think, uh, are really interesting here that I think are worth, exploring a little more so that a listener can kinda really get a full appreciation for this. So there's a couple of things. Number 1, when you look at any type of market segment, right, and you're going to be doing business with them, and you're gonna be assessing risk, the more of those types of people or those types of businesses that you have in the database, if you will, the more you learn, right? The more predictive it is. So, yeah, as you mentioned, it's really difficult for traditional banks to assess risk for individual or freelancers or contractors, however we want, solopreneurs, as I mentioned, because they don't have enough of them in there, and they haven't studied them to understand the commonalities, right? To see patterns and to be able to say, okay, uh, a software developer, as you mentioned, who is a freelance contractor building a variety of different projects for a variety of different clients, makes 300 grand a year, but his business is somewhat cyclical, or he's chosen to take the summers off every year with his family and then works, like the school year hours or whatever. Like, so they haven't got enough of those people in there to be able to assess the risk, right? It doesn't look like, as you mentioned, the coffee shop or the what mom and pop bakery or whatever.
That's right.
The other thing that was really interesting to me, you said, and I'd love for you to maybe dive in a bit more on it, is this notion of just like really having a relationship with the entrepreneur, right? With the freelancer. It jumps out at me a lot because one of the other podcasts that is on the Finser Marketing Podcast Network is the Advisor Financing Forum that we're producing for a company called Skyview Partners. And Skyview Partners focuses exclusively on RIAs and independent financial advisors and provides funding for them, right? So financing for their businesses. And as you mentioned with the freelancer market, traditionally banks have not lent money to financial advisors. And it sounds preposterous, right? That if you're financial advisors and that anybody who knows that business is they've got great recurring revenue streams. They know finance. Yeah. You can look at their uh, banks haven't lent to them, right? And the reason is they're non-traditional businesses. They have no assets. There's no collateral to attach. And so they didn't really understand the business. And so therefore they kind of shied away from it so one of the things that Scott Wetzel, the CEO of Skyview, mentioned, he's like, he recommends that advisors and RIA firms get a relationship with a community bank, preferably one of the community banks that is a part of the Skyview network of banks that they use for funding,
Sure.
uh, because having that relationship and that bank gets to know you makes them puts them in a better position to be able to lend to you, right? So when I think about Joust and the Gestalt concepts that you were talking about, it's such a great parallel. Like that somebody is in the system, the more Joust knows about you, the
Exactly.
more you, right, the better their opportunity is to lend you because they can say, hey, we know our customer, we see you, we're comfortable with you, let's talk about this. So uh anyways, that's kind of what struck to my mind. How do you so let's go back to the mortgage thing. Do you provide mortgages to the freelancers, or is that something that's happening down the road? I mean, we talked a little bit about just kind of the business management and the invoicing component, but is that something that's you're thinking about down the road?
Certainly thinking about it. We, as a startup, you have to be very, very, very disciplined.
Yeah, right. Sure.
The fact that we want to offer all of the things, and we started with merchant services, and the credit that we provide is really uh, it's essentially factoring, right? It's not a
Sure.
true form of capital when it comes to lending. And so, however, we basically distilling some of the lessons there, and the next step is to get into more traditional lending with a credit product that's more traditional revolving lines and loans, and that would be the stepping stone into more holistic solutions for these micro businesses such as mortgages. It's interesting because we're going to be breaking the paradigm again here. We build something for business, and historically, financial services are sort of the segregate, business activity from personal activity for various reasons. But we feel that in this new world where micro business is both a person and a business, you really can't do that. You're creating a terrible user experience, and so we're thinking after we get the business lending out of the way and sort of polish it out, make sure the product is there's a product market fit and it's being consumed, then we can start moving into ancillary things to help a person, run their business, such as having a low mortgage payment, right? Especially when you
Right.
work
Yeah.
from home
Yeah.
and not in the office. Yeah, so it's most certainly on the roadmap. It's just that it is further down the roadmap. We want to get the business side right first.
That's really interesting. It's so true. I mean, as more people, and right now, everybody's working from home, or most everybody is working from home. The As that evolves, right? As we get more and more people who kind of permanently work from home, that the home office becomes it's a legitimate part of the business. I mean, we always have the home office expense that we can deduct on our taxes, but you start thinking about investing in, as imagine if you lived in a small home right now
Yeah.
and suddenly you're working from home
Yep.
and you think to yourself, like, this house needs to be bigger, right? I need to buy a bigger place. I need to have a legitimate dedicated portion of my primary residence for my business, right?
Yeah.
You could see people going, well, I need to finance that. That needs to be a business financeable decision, even if I'm a solopreneur or whatever. Really fascinating. So let's take a step back and talk a little bit more about the startup process as it relates to a banking payment solution like Joust. Because unlike a lot of startups, Joust obviously isn't something that, you and a few coders got together over the weekend with a few beers and you're like, hey, what if we just whip together this banking solution and we'll do an MVP and just throw it out there and see what people think. Uh, you were a formula regulator, right? yeah, yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of security hoops to jump through. There's a lot of regulatory hoops to jump through. So what's the process like? What did that look like to get this thing off the ground? I think some people, I'm sure, would love to hear that journey.
Sure. Look, let's not discount getting ideas over a beer or a joint. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
Elon Musk. Uh,
I'm always game for hanging out and do this. You want to get together, do some beers. We'll social distance, but we'll have beers involved.
we'll definitely social distance.
Hey there, let's take a quick break to talk about the Benzinga Global FinTech Awards coming up on November 10th, 2020 in New York City, assuming COVID's not putting a clamp down still on our in-person events. You can expect to go to New York and get in the same room with a whole bunch of other really smart entrepreneurs building really cool stuff in the fintech space. You'll also be in the same room with lots of VCs and angel investors interested in investing in the space, as well as a lot of the people at the enterprise level at the largest financial firms in the world who could be your corporate development partners, could be your business development partners, could be your enterprise clients. So really good place to be, mix and mingle. One of the things I like about the FinTech Awards, and I've been before, is you get to interact with other people and see what they're working on now, right? I've noticed that this community is very vibrant, and having been in it for over a decade on the fintech side, I've noticed like several of my friends that I meet are working on a new project now, and they were working on something different a couple of years ago, just like Lamine, right? And that's the way the entrepreneurial life is. People are always working on the next things that are interesting. They build something, they exit. They build something, they fail. They build something, they're still working on it, right? Or whatever that is. It's really, really interesting. It's a very vibrant environment to be a part of. So I love it. Highly encourage you to attend if you can. If you want to attend, we actually have a discount code, SoFin VIP, SoFin VIP, if you want to go to that and get a discount. Also, I highly encourage you, if you are a startup founder or you know a startup founder, to nominate them. So go there and click apply for 2020 and make sure somebody gets nominated who you think is worthy, even if that person is you and your startup. So do that right away. Also, I'm going to be having Jason Raznick join me on this show. He's the founder of Benzinga, a good friend of mine. We're going to be talking about the FinTech Awards, of course, but most importantly, a question that's been nagging me for a very long time. Where the heck did the name Benzinga come from, right? His last name's Raznick, not Benzinga. I want to know where the name came from. Really interested. Anyways, we'll talk about a whole bunch of stuff. Jason's a really good dude, vibrant, talks really fast though. So make sure you drink a lot of coffee before that episode so you can keep up. All right, let's get back to our conversation with Lamine.
So yes, you're absolutely right. We hacked together a national bank with just a few $1 million. It is unheard of. If you are going to build a bank with any kind of presence, historically you have to put together an investment packet. It's multi-million-dollar investment packet. You have to convince the regulators at both the state level and the federal level. It's a multi-year process to release a fairly simple solution. And so we all of us on the team, especially my co-founder and I, come from backgrounds where we understand the barriers to deploying any financial product, including banking. And so we were thinking strategically, and we partnered with right financial partners to sort of piggyback off their charter. So our MVP, so to speak, wasn't just an app that went out there, right? So that we can test it, but the MVP was essentially us white labeling some of the financial products like a bank account using a third party bank where they maintain the regulatory burden and they already have all the clearances. They maintain some of the security aspects of issuing the account. We manage the sort of a pretty front end and streamlined user experience. So we work with a bank called MBKC in Kansas City. They're a fantastic partner. They're super responsive. They're, whatever we have crazy ideas, they try to accommodate them. Uh, we work with a company called TSYS. It's a payment processor, a global payment processor, and they work with Wells Fargo on the back end. And so there are quite a few institutions. And so we sort of brought in these pieces that were disparate in financial services and created this app. So the product is novel, the user experience is unique, but the back end, when it comes to not the technology back end, but the financial back end, is a whole bunch of different, it's a quilt of financial incumbent type services. That's the way we were thinking about our MVP. And even with that in mind, despite the fact that we're partnering with these platforms that have regulatory clearances, been around for a while, it was still a very strenuous process, as you can imagine, because anytime you interface with these products, you are exposed to a whole slew of liabilities. Anything to do with customers' information, right? You have to, in payments, there's a concept called PCI compliance. There's SOC 2 in banking. And so there are a number of regulations that say, look, if you're a technology company and if anything passes through you, any information at all, you have to have a certain framework in mind that will keep you secure. And so let me take a step back. Now that you kind of know the general landscape and how we were thinking, I'll tell you a bit about how we thought about the app and why we built it the way we built it. So George Kurtica, my co-founder, when we were talking about this concept, he was still at JP Morgan, kind of leading technology strategy there. Before that, he was at BBVA, helping them incubate a number of fintech products in-house and manage their API platform. They were one of the first banks in the world to have open API and open APIs, plural. And
Yeah.
and so he was at Simple, which was the first U.S. neobank, one of the early employees there, PayPal. So George and I were chatting about the solution that freelancers need, right? And I kind of give you a rundown of the probably the most acute pain points, being unable to collect. But freelancers also need a quick way to set up a bank account. They also don't want to go through traditional merchant onboarding to get payments. And so we said, let's have one application that feels like Venmo. It's that simple. The thesis is that our small business partners don't want to go through traditional business onboarding. They want sort of instant gratification type experience that they're getting from, really any other modern app, even non-banking like Uber and Lyft and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And we said that if we can simplify all that and have this, sort of all the complexity hidden with a nice sort of easy interface, then we have something huge here because they need the utility of all of those products, but they don't want to go through the steps of the friction steps of onboarding and so forth. And so we then started to talk to these partners and trying to figure out what is the process of integrating them. How much will it cost us? What kind of burden will it be on a startup? How much money will we need for their to sort of maintain this infrastructure? And then think about which ones can we just replace eventually in the future and build ourselves. And so we build a pretty kind of a robust product roadmap based on that. Like basically outsource as much as you can with a unified framework to serve the customer right away, right? So and very much MVP spirit. But an MVP in the banking space is a very mature, very secure, compliant app.
Yeah.
And then iterate on that, right? Make it prettier with every step. Address certain features that maybe not banking, like invoicing features. Build various different bells and whistles on top as you go. So that was the thinking and that was the approach.
Yeah, I love that approach, and I think it's so important, and it's very teachable moment, if you will, or series of moments that very often when we think about a startup, we think about I've got to build everything. Like this is going to be my product, right? They think we tend to think about product, right? I'm building something. The reality is you're trying to solve a problem, and provide a service, right, or a value proposition for the end customer, right? And if that's you start with a goal of like, I'm solving this problem and providing this value, sometimes just building on top of something somebody else has already built allows you to move faster, iterate quicker, and deliver a higher quality service out of the box than if you had to build this. Because I imagine the process of starting a bank, getting that banking charter, and setting up all the infrastructure that would be necessary before you actually launched this customer facing solution that is Joust today. The normal runway for something like that probably would have been like maybe 3, 4 years just before you could take it public. That's my guess, right?
Exactly.
But instead, you were able to turn that around in, like what, a year, 18 months, and be up and running and out there serving customers.
I mean, we were up and running technically in 7 months from
Wow.
the first line of code to apps out in the market and the public beta.
That is crazy
It's
fast.
insane,
That's
isn't it?
amazing.
It's
It
fast.
is. It is.
That's technology at its core.
That's amazing. I love that. Imagine if you told somebody that like 20 years ago, like, hey, listen, I'm going to have a banking solution out in the marketplace from, start now, 7 months from now. They think you're nuts.
Right.
Before we go too much more deeper into the conversation, I wanted to make sure I do my favorite part of the podcast, which is uh, every time somebody comes on the show and every time somebody presents at the SoFin event, one of the things I encourage them to do is have an ask of the audience, right? You've got the stage, you've got people listening, you've got people watching you if in person, and they're there to hear something and they're there to be part of the community. So I always tell every presenter, every startup founder, have an ask, have something you want for the audience. And I have that same recommendation for everybody who attends. The same thing, like everybody who is listening right now, you should have an ask of the rest of the community. So if you do, you can send in that ask to me. You can, send it in Mike@finservmarketing.com or hook us up on the socials anywhere you want to go. So check that out. But here we are for you. This is your stage. You've got people listening and people listening to this, when it first comes out, and probably people listening to this years from now when they're interested in Lamine. What would you ask of somebody who's listening right now? What would you like them to do?
Yeah, this is a great opportunity for me to share what's on my mind. So we're transitioning. We are merging with another company. We're going to be working with a platform that serves the same customer, these solopreneurs, micro businesses, and so forth, in different ways that are non financially oriented. And so the holistic product is going to be absolutely amazing. A small business or an individual, for instance, who wants to start a small business will be able to go through the entire process from step one of having an idea, incorporating their business, managing all the paperwork in one place for that business, acquiring their payments and banking and credit, and managing things like their website, so marketing as well, all in one platform, right? And that's super exciting. Unfortunately, the deal is not done yet, and it should be done next week. So I cannot reveal the new name and brand. But my ask is that you guys follow us on joust.com. And then when the day comes and we officiate that merger, I would love for anyone who is a business now to start using this platform. It's going to be best in class. There's simply nothing like it out there. And then, be mindful. There are a lot of folks around you, even if you're not a business and a small business or freelancer. There are a number of contractors and freelancers who are experiencing pretty tough times, and they need tools to optimize what they do. They need tools to, reduce the fees that they currently pay for financial products, for other business tools, HR products, accounting products. And so keep that in mind, that we could be the solution for them, and feel free to to refer them to us. We'd love to help anyone we can. In fact, after South by Southwest was canceled this year, Joust was Interactive Innovation Award finalist. We were super bummed about the cancellation, but we went out there and we said, hey, if you're a freelancer impacted by this cancellation, download Joust today, set up an account, and if you have invoices, we'll guarantee them for you, right? Or we'll front the capital associated with those invoices. And so it's a huge value add to folks who need to manage cash flows now more than ever. And my ask is that's to spread the word.
I love that ask it, and I'll echo it because with a little bit of amplification that there are many people who are suddenly and unexpectedly finding themselves freelancers as a first time founder, if you will, or first time contractor, right? Because they had a job, 3-4 months ago. Maybe they've been laid off and now they're finding themselves having to do some, side hustle, if you want to call it that, or whatever it is that they've got going on. And they're maybe their employer said, "Hey, we got to let you go as a W-2, but we'll keep you on as a contractor and throw some work your way." So if that's you, or somebody like that, turn them on to Joust. And it's really easy, by the way. It's joust.com. So I remember asking you, like, how did you get joust.com? And it turns out, writing a check sometimes helps things. Uh, um, so I like I said, I love that ask, and you're spot on that so many people really could use some help. And I can't wait to hear the full details of the new merger, because I like the fact that it is this one-stop shop, if you will, for managing a lot of your business assets, getting the business off the ground, running the business, and then managing it from a financial perspective. Fantastic news about that. And you know what? Here's the deal. So if we'll be publishing this soon, and if for some reason the news isn't public yet, after it becomes public, what I will do is I'll re-record the intro to the podcast and mention the new name. But I would imagine the joust.com domain is going to stay up after the merger for at least the foreseeable future, correct?
It will stay up briefly. We are going to be transitioning to the new brand and sort
Okay.
of operating under the umbrella of the new brand. So joust.com will not be permanent, but we'll redirect folks.
Okay, I was gonna say, yeah, redirect or something like that, and then of course sign up for the emails and all that kind of jazz. Uh, okay, so let's pre-merger stuff, and maybe even part of the merger concept. What have you learned since launching Joust that you really didn't know going in, like kind of the unexpected
Mhm.
positives and negatives, I guess? I mean, every startup, there's things you're delighted by that you're like, oh wow, I didn't expect this. This is great. And then there are, oh, holy crap, like I didn't see this coming. So what are some of those things that you're like, oh, uh, I didn't see that coming? What are some things you learned?
Everything. Uh, every startup journey is unique, and it's full of lessons, right? So you can't, even if you have a successful run at one company, you can't just say, like, I can do this in a replicatable fashion, even if you're doing quite literally the same thing, and we weren't. And so it was a whole new world for us, and we, unlike a lot of startup founders, we were sort of experts in our domain, and we still learned so much. But to be completely honest with you, one of the most important lessons, and probably most humbling lesson from the Joust experience for me, was this, and it's almost it's sort of common knowledge these days, that as a startup you want to focus on something very narrow and very specific and do it well. And that was the lesson that I learned. I mentioned earlier in this podcast is that we hacked together the solution that was pretty robust right out of the gate, right, as an MVP. There was a bank account, merchant account, invoicing, credit, and invoice factoring. And I thought, a lot of those things are commodities, and what really makes it unique is the combination, right? This is entourage effect of all these tools together. And what I learned very quickly is that we were able to hack it together. It was absolutely incredible, and it was a fascinating product. But to maintain that product efficiently and to ensure that it grows and scales well without any hiccups, you're going to require a lot of bandwidth, right? So a team of sort of commensurate size. And if I could do this over again, I would do it in stages. I would focus on something very specific that our customers wanted. We knew that from day one, and that was PayArmor. I would have started just basic invoicing in PayArmor, and then layer solutions one after another, after we just completely nail one function. And so we're not distracted. It was one of the most I would say painful lessons to learn. We are aware of our limitations. We're aware of our strengths as well. And I'd say that's a very, very, very important lesson I'll carry with me. And another lesson I've sort of reinforced in my head, and I'd like to share this with the audience, is what makes startups so effective, right? There's so many theories out there, many books written on why startups are great. But what's become apparent to me, there's only one thing that makes startups better than the incumbents. And it's not that we're smarter, it's not that we're more creative. None of that is true. Most incumbents have very smart people working for them, very creative folks, a ton of capital, and quite frequently lots of desire to innovate. But there's one thing that they can do that we can, and it's break rules. And it's really hard to do in financial services
Mm.
without getting yourself in trouble. And so, if you're a startup in financial services specifically, a fintech of any kind, and if you're not breaking rules, you might as well pack up and go home. Right? You have to continue to break the rules and create new norms. And think of what Square did. Right? Square broke the system through their sort of hacked onboarding and created a concept of payment facilitation. Right? Instead of sending Square executives to jail and finding them crazy fees with what they've done because they broke every single anti-money laundering rule. The network said, well, they're so effective. Why punishing them? Why don't we just carve out the space and create
Mm.
a concept and build rules around it? And so that is how you can succeed, especially in fintech. Otherwise, it's just not worth it. There's no way a startup can beat, say, a large brand on being smarter, better, and faster to market. Uh, no freaking way. You have to think outside the box. You have to live outside the box, and you have to be brave enough and savvy enough to continue to break the rules.
I would layer onto that, and I think you're 100% correct, is just the quickness and agility, right? One of the things that you and I both know from having lots of experience dealing with larger financial firms is while they have the deepest of pockets and is endless brain power, they don't tend to move quick, right? Until they decide to move quick. When they decide like this is something we're going after, they go at it quick and they transform their business
Mhm.
really rapidly. I think about Fidelity Investments. When I joined Fidelity, online discount brokerage was really just kind of this new thing, right? This is back in the late 90s. And so, they had online brokerage, but they were expensive. It was like $25 a trade. And some of the e-trades and so forth were getting much, much cheaper. But suddenly when Fidelity decided they were going to go and compete at that price point, they moved really, really quickly. And I've seen that over the years many, many times that if you're going to start, you're going to be a new innovator, move quick, as you mentioned, break some rules, and even if those rules are kind of just common sense or not, common wisdom rules, right? They don't have to necessarily be breaking banking rules. They can be just like breaking the rules of like this is how it's done. You know, you know, just hey, yeah, we're gonna make it online. It's gonna be cheap. You saw it with Robinhood. Hey, well, guess what? We're gonna launch a online discount brokerage. It's gonna be mobile only. We're not even gonna allow you to do anything on a website.
That's right.
Well,
Yeah,
that's wacky. It's gonna be
exactly.
free trading. That breaks people's brains. They can't even comprehend that concept, and it's gonna be free trading. Like, well, free? How the hell are you gonna make any money? Well, I'll tell you how you make money. So that just kind of broke people's mental state. Uh, one of the things I wanted to go back to, which you mentioned, and I thought it was really an astute point of getting laser focused on one thing you do, getting traction on that thing, and getting like really, really good at it. So you mentioned the uh, payment processing and a really simple invoicing. If you had to do it over again, you might have focused there. And I see that Joust isn't the only startup that's kind of found themselves deciding, hey, we've got to do a lot more stuff. We got to bring a lot more value to attract our customer. And I wonder, I have my theory on this that maybe there's a bit of I guess a little bit of doubt and a little bit of insecurity that often founding teams have that like, well, nobody's going to be willing to just use this one little thing. Like that's not enough to build a business on, or that's not enough to convince investors to invest in us because they'll think the opportunity is too small. Uh, what do
Bingo.
you think? Is that what it is? You think that's what it is? The investors segment?
Yeah. So I can tell you that both points are true. I think especially if you're a first or second time startup founder and perhaps undercapitalized, you're going to feel insecure. There's no way
Mhm.
around it. I guarantee you that no matter who you are, you're going to feel insecure about your product, your team, and yourself, and you're going to try to overbuild, right, to compensate. Um, but it's especially true if you're relying on venture capital to launch the product. Unless you're bootstrapping and you can afford it, then you can actually have enough of the sort of confidence to do what you think is right. But what frequently happens, and it certainly happened to us, is that because it's still expensive, despite the fact that we hacked it pretty quickly, it was pretty expensive to build. We had to get venture capital on the front end of this transaction, and investors told us specifically that they want a banking solution. They're
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
interested in anything else. And it happens this way. And we knew that the banking is going to be the part of this application. And we said, well, let's just go ahead and deploy it right away, knowing damn well that it was going to create a lot of complexity for us. Threat vectors, and when it comes to fighting fraud and a number of other things. And we knew that banking solution that we were sort of integrating with, despite the fact that it was best in the market, it was still fairly immature. And the partners had to learn a lot of lessons, and we knew we were going to be learning a ton of lessons. And we took the risk, and we said we need capital. It makes sense as a founder and as a CEO. Sometimes you have to make those decisions that are quote unquote compromises, right? They're not the most optimal decisions. You frequently don't have the luxury of making the most optimal decision every time. You just optimize according to your constraints, and that's it. That's basically the psychological component of feeling insecure about customers and what they want, despite the fact that data shows otherwise. Frequently, for us especially, we knew customers wanted payments. That's all I care about, fast
Mm.
payments. And then secondary, you can be led astray by investors who are ambitious, right? And they see things, they see other products out there that are maybe very mature products, have been around for years, and they think, well, this is a competent team, they can deploy something fast, we can compete with them really fast. And the truth is, if you bite off too much, this could potentially end up not so great for you.
Yeah, yeah, and we've all learned that over the years a lot. Is that you look at it's not just a feature creep concept. Look, every feature or additive service you put on to the platform, you've got to service it, right? Once it's there, it can't break. It's got to be maintained, right? And the like, and if that costs time, as you mentioned, it costs human capital. You have to have people there to support things, and so if the simpler you can keep it, the more focused you could keep it, the more frankly laser focused on providing the service and the value prop, as we talked about earlier, to the end client or the end user, that they value, right? That's the thing that they want most. You're going to get more traction, and then, as you said, you'll find the other things to layer on. That's really smart advice. I'm glad you shared that. I really do appreciate it, because I think not only founders that might be listening that are just getting started need to hear that occasionally. I think founders that are a couple of years in sometimes and running a business and maybe getting a little frustrated with slow traction or whatever might occasionally want to look at the business and go, are we too complicated? Should we really get dialed in and more laser focused on the things that we know people are using more, and maybe kind of well, hell, Basecamp did that, right?
That's right.
For a long time, 37 Signals, they had a variety of different other products, and then eventually they said, "Hey, listen, Basecamp's the one. This is what we do best. This is what our customers value most. This is where we can provide the most value," and that's it. They rebranded the company just Basecamp, and they focused. Although they just launched a new email product, so I guess they're coming.
And they're, I would say, very interesting founders
Yeah.
with a fascinating strategy, how to get people very angry about things and get them to use their product.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, they no what's it? No such thing as bad publicity, right? Just get out there and shake the apple cart a little bit. That's great. Well, very cool. Well, listen, Lamine, this has been really, great for me. I've really liked the journey and hearing about the founding of Joust and how much traction you've made already, and the things that you're bringing to market. I think it's incredibly important And I really applaud what you're doing. And I can't wait to hear the full details of the new merger.
I can't wait to share
It's great. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, sir. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Mike.
Uh,
Anytime. It's been incredibly fun to discuss this journey, and I look forward to following up.
Perfect. All right. Have a good one. Thanks.
Take care.
All right. I hope you really enjoyed that conversation with Lamine. As I kind of mentioned in the intro, what I find really, really compelling about Lamine as an entrepreneur is how he is able to go after these really complex and difficult challenges and just tackle them and get them off the ground and into production super quickly. And that really is a testament to him and his ability to tackle these problems, because I personally would want nothing to do with something that complex and that regulatory heavy, but he's done it. And again, because he knows how to navigate the regulatory environment, it really gives him an edge. And that's one of the things that I often talk about for the space is that, look, we're in a regulated industry, and a lot of people come into the fintech world and think, oh, it's an easy idea and I can get going on this. And I often talk about how long the actual hockey stick is for startups in the fintech space. But having domain expertise is really, really valuable. And in fact, on all the episodes so far, one of the things you will notice with all the guests is they had a heavy amount of domain expertise in the area they were going into. It didn't mean that they were coders. It didn't mean that they were domain experts in the technical aspects in terms of developing and building the product, but they knew the business, right? They knew, as an example, Eric Smith there at App Brilliance, he really knows payments, right? He understood that marketplace. So he knew how to spot the opportunity and how to seize the opportunity and what the hurdles were going to be. You have Ari Palmer at Tax Taker, right? She was in the accounting space. She was already in there dealing with clients and helping them navigate their tax credit situation for R&D and doing that more mechanically, manually. And then she saw the opportunity for a tech solution to deliver that. We saw that with the Cube Money team, right? With Shane Walker. He was already a financial advisor and he was aware of this cash envelope methodology. So this was not a thing where he had to try to invent some sort of new methodology for financial wellness. He was already living it and kind of preaching it to his financial advisory clients, and then said, hey, we have a technical solution here that we can implement in the world. So very, very important in this space. Does it mean you have to be heavy on domain expertise? No, of course not. I mean, look at the Stripe guys. They didn't have huge, heavy domain expertise. They were college students. And in a couple of weeks here, I've got a guest, actually two guests coming on the show who started a very, very successful startup in the wealth management space. And they started it when they were 19 years old. So of course, they did not have huge domain expertise either. But if you don't have it, you better get it in-house quickly if you're going to be able to navigate some of these complex waters in the fintech space. Okay. All right. Enough yammering from me. Make sure you do like and subscribe to the podcast. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or Google Podcasts. They're really kind of getting a little confused with that. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen there. But anyways, like it, give it a share on socials, please. And if you want to be on the show, or if you have a suggestion for a guest or a topic for the show, please do reach out. You can reach out to me at mike@finservemarketing.com, or you can just swing by the website or hit me up on social. I will make sure I get with you. Okay. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll see you next time on the SoFin Podcast. See ya. Bye.